Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys. Hello and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. I am your co-host PVSB, and when I'm not hosting this wonderful podcast along with my BFF, I serve as Partnership Acceleration Lead at Flywheel. Joining me for today's very special episode, it's our annual year-end summary. So we'll look back in 2023, is my co-founder, my best friend, my ride or die. He is the man known as Sri. Sri, how are you?
Doing awesome. Pleasure to do this in person with you.
I love doing this.
Yeah, it's time for some rest, some reflection. I know you're going to be busy in Mickey World down in Florida. I'm still scrambling to put together a short vacation with my family, maybe Mexico, somewhere near us right there in Cabo. I'm not sure if it'll materialize. Let's see. But I think today, Peter, is an important day because we're going to summarize all of 2023 and some of the big learnings we had, and I can't wait to do it.
Yeah, before we get to that, I want to remind everybody, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast listening platform, and particularly if you subscribe and listen on Spotify or Apple, please give us a rating. The rating is important because it helps other people discover us because it feeds the search algorithm. So please do that. And of course, we want to acknowledge that we're part of a very exclusive podcast collective. Our sister podcast, Fast Forward, hosted by Brian Gildenberg, the third CPG guy, and of course, CPG Scoop with Risa and Jennifer, and of course, last but certainly not least, the very fast-growing FMCG guys with Daniel, Efrain, and Christine over in the EU. Between us, we provide, hopefully, our audience with different perspectives, but all around this lovely CPG retail industry that we find ourselves in. So that's really great. And of course, we want to thank, as always, Next Up. You know that the CPG guys are very mission focused. So Next Up is an organization that is dedicated to advancing the cause of women in business and promoting gender equality in the workplace. There'll be a link to our Next Up landing page in the digital liner notes of this podcast. And of course, I also want to recognize that if you're doing in the link, if you're in the digital liner notes of this episode, please make sure to also follow the professional pursuits of Shri's two daughters, Rhea Raj and Lara Raj. Lara is now one of the newest members of the global band sensation Cat's Eye. Their album will debut in June of 2024. So we're really excited about that. Okay. Yes, so Sri, let's get to it. Let's start off. We've tried to go through, and if you are avid followers of the Fresh Four, which we do with our dear friends Melissa Burdick and Andrea Lay, thank you, ladies, of course, for your participation in that throughout the year. You are part of our family. We're so grateful to have you do that. Then these stories should not be too shocking for you, but we've kind of curated through those weekly news segments that we cover and we're going to highlight the ones that we think are the most salient, the most important, the most profound in terms of the implications they have for the advancement. Let's start on kind of a sour note or a sad note. Sri, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with, as you mentioned, hey, these are articles that we usually discuss on the Fresh Four, but these are also the most, I think, things that stood out in our minds for 2023 regardless. So I'm going to start, as Peter mentioned, on a little bit of a disappointment for me personally because I knew this company very well. I knew the founding team pretty well, and that is Boxed.com. Boxed had been around over a decade, found by my friend Che Huang, really mastered the art of packaging and being able to pioneers in home delivery.
And you would describe them as an e-commerce version of a club store.
Absolutely. They were the competition for Costco back in the days because Costco.com was pretty much just a website where you could browse. Of course, you can buy now. And they were the online version of a club. And it was disappointing this year to see them sunset. They went through some SPAC funding. Some stuff didn't work out. And at the end of the day, they declared bankruptcy.
That was a big term in 2022, SPAC. It
SPAC
was
was a big
the how
term.
to do an IPO in a very intriguing way. I don't think there were any SPACs that I heard of that were executed that ended up producing anything meaningful.
Not really. 2023 was the year of funding dried up in the market for startups right across the board. There was no funding due to how the economy ran. But was personally disappointing for me. I had great hopes for Box.com, and here we are. Bankruptcy was announced, and it's in the final chapter. I'm sure the brand equity of Box.com still exists, so we'll see who picks it up, what happens next, things of that nature. But Peter, what's next?
Well, in terms of growth opportunities, partnership seems to be where an upper funnel capability seems to be what's driving the retail media industry. So early on in the year, Albertsons Media Collective announced a partnership with Omnicom and the Trade Desk, which allowed for programmatic advertising and targeting using the purchasing behavior of Albertsons shoppers. And that was just the first in a series of it seemed like every other week there was an announcement of, and that one was focused around connected television, right, in particular. But it seemed like every week there was another announcement of a retail media platform and an off-site asset and publisher that could leverage the data of purchasing behavior through retailers to target more upper funnel advertising activities. So that was a very big one. Omnicom is quite capable in that space, and obviously the Trade Desk has a very powerful DSP. So between the three of them, that really ushered in the year and set the tone for what has continued through to this day. I'm going to follow that by talking about the brand side of things, which is the iconic and venerable brand. This is a fun one. The iconic and venerable brand PepsiCo redesigned its logo. Now, you may remember that about 15 years ago, PepsiCo moved and redesigned its logo. In fact, it was a redesign that also affected its division at the time, Tropicana, and they did a massive redesign there under the marketing leadership of Massimo D'Amore. And this spelled the end of that particular era. PepsiCo, in I think it's an homage to what the logo looked like before the redesign. They've returned to that kind of a classic circular logo sign, and it really has transformed the brand. And you see Todd Kaplan, the chief marketing officer for trademark Pepsi, basically in front of any microphone that he can get in front of, talking about the redesign of this brand.
So PepsiCo redesigned its logo. Having worked there for a decade plus, I feel like the new logo very much looks like the logo from the 80s, 90s when Michael Jackson was featuring in Pepsi ads. It just looks like a redesign. Retro came into play for sure. But it was kind of like an iconic moment for an iconic brand that it chose to do that. The next one was a little bit of I would say a surprise for me when it was first announced, and then it was a surprise when it was announced a second time a month later.
They reversed their decision.
And that is Giant Eagle announced in about March 2023, around that time frame, let's say spring 2023, that they're going to do away with paper circulars. And at that time, that was COVID, the end of COVID. Digital was at an all-time high. E-commerce, click and collect. Month later, they came back and said, no, we're going to keep our physical circulars. I'll tell you that decision was a good decision. 6-7 months down the line, as the year comes to a close, the role of paper circulars in retail and consumer shopping is very important. There are large swarms of population in the country that to the day waits for the inserts in the mail and in newspapers every Sunday morning to see what deals and features happen on the front page for them to shop. Thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I agree. It was a lofty goal to try and end. Listen, the expense that goes into maintaining paper circulars is substantial for retailers. It is not. It's not a nickel and dime piece of business. It is a large part of the operational expenses of retailers. So their goal to try and get out of that and move towards digital, while aspirational, the data told them very quickly it was having a debilitating effect on volume. And so they reversed their decision and said, no, in certain markets, we need to have a paper circular. They're not quite ready to move away from it. So at least they were able to correct course correct midstream and not be a slave to the decision and damn the torpedoes, on we go. So I think that was a big one. Let's move on to Cincinnati. So we all know that in 2022, Kroger and Albertsons announced the intention to merge their two businesses. And we also knew that going into that, there were areas of the country where there was substantial overlap and redundancy. And part of their commitment was they were not going to close any stores, which means they had to figure out what they were going to do in markets like Chicago, where Albertsons has Jewel and Kroger had Dominick's. Well, they came up with a solution. They went to C&S Wholesale and they announced that upon the closing of the merger, when the government would approve it and both boards would approve, that they would sell upwards of 400 stores to C&S and also license brand names, banner names for use in particular markets. So this was their way of acquiescing to what were the likely requirements of the Federal Trade Commission so that they could consummate the merger, which as of the recording of this episode still has not been consummated. It hasn't been approved, but we saw this as one of the last steps towards doing it. Though I will say this, Sri, they have been on a recent media binge to try and convince people on why the merger is good and that it's not going to cause the loss of jobs or other things like that. So I think there's still work that they're doing from a political standpoint, but this was a big hurdle they needed to get over. What were they going to do in the markets where they had considerable overlap? And they solved that by identifying C&S as the buyer.
Yeah, a little bit of a wait and watch game, and that's what we're doing today to see where this ends up at the end of the day. So I'm going to move over, Peter, to doing a little bit of history.
Yeah.
It was a 1979 term called Taco Tuesday.
Oh, my daughter still uses that, Taco Tuesday at the Bond
Taco
household.
Tuesday. And here's how Taco Tuesdays was first born. Taco John's was granted a trademark back in 1989. Where that came from is they started offering 2 tacos for 99 cents on the slowest moving day, Tuesday. Do you know that's how Taco Tuesday was born?
That was it. That's how you move volume.
It's like a big deal in America today, like it's Taco Tuesday. We just take that for granted. And those who make food, Mexican food, kind of now rally around Taco Tuesdays as the day for eating tacos.
Yeah.
So calling back on this trademark infringement battle that happened when Taco Bell decided to adopt the term Taco Tuesday.
They thought it was in the public domain.
Yeah, exactly.
They wanted to argue that.
People didn't even know. Research would show, though, that Taco John actually owned the trademark, won that argument in the copyright infringement, and indeed now is one of the sole people using Taco Tuesdays.
They ultimately settled with Taco Bell and retained control of that.
They retained control of it.
But they also benefited from this because Taco John is not a very nationally well-known.
Back in the limelight.
But this brought them back into the limelight, totally. And they benefited from it and saw a substantial amount of volume surging.
And so why do I want to say no way, Jose, next?
Because Trader Joe felt the need in this era of growing e-commerce volume that they were still firmly ensconced in the 20th century. They said, sorry, e-commerce is not and will not be a priority for this chain, which they feel is built upon the interactions between their store associates and the consumers that shop those stores. So the idea of being able to go on, and if you know Trader Joe, it's a company that is predominantly private label, though not exclusively, but they have very intriguing flavors, and it's a staple in the markets where they are. So many people use Trader Joe's, but they've never done e-commerce. They won't even be part of a third-party delivery platform like Instacart. They have steadfastly held solid on their decision not to allow that to happen. And they wanted the market to know, don't think that just because there's all this other growth around e-commerce taking place in grocery that we're getting in the game. We're not, and just don't expect us to do so. They were pretty adamant about this.
I'm actually quite surprised that I would have told you 3 years ago when we were in the middle of COVID, 2 years ago, that you're not going to make it as a retailer if you don't have some form of omni-channel component, click and collect especially. But Trader Joe's has withstood the test of time, figured out how to navigate, made hunting in stores still the treasure hunt mentality.
That is
very
a definite treasure
attractive,
hunt
kept
story.
prices very attractive by staying private label for the most part, and figured out a formula for not embracing e-commerce and still gets by the droves customers.
Yep.
Everyone talks about Trader Joe's.
Yep. All right.
Speaking of food and bev, the next thing I'm about to say is, what's for dinner, Peter? It's amongst the most complex statement for families everywhere to answer, from decisions about budget and dietary specifications, cooking skills, personal preferences. So much more is at stake when someone asks that question. And so Instacart added a artificial intelligence component to search to allow flexibility to get this answer on their platform when you're shopping for groceries with a capability called Ask Instacart.
Yeah, so it transformed the way we do search, which in current search on sites like Amazon or Walmart or Kroger, it tends to be very vertical in nature. You come to the site, you enter in the product name or the product category that you're looking for, and it spits you back results. What Instacart did is they flipped that 90 degrees and made it a horizontal search capability where you could do things like say, I'm throwing a backyard barbecue. What do I need? And Instacart and Ask Instacart can find you the items rather than you having to sit there and systematically say, I want charcoal, I want chicken, I want cheese, I want burgers, I want buns. It makes it a lot easier, and it's kind of like walking into a physical store and going to the 4th of July section and being able to very quickly get everything you want. So very transformational. And then on the other end of that, because they weren't the only one to use AI, there's also the application retailers are using for AI relative to their suppliers. So at the Amazon Accelerate conference back in September, Amazon announced that they were making available to Amazon sellers an AI-based product detail page populator. So what you could do is you could take something as simple as the content on your package flat, and Amazon would take that information and through generative AI fully populate Amazon-friendly language that attunes to what drives search, which reduces the amount of effort an Amazon seller would have to do to populate a PDP by about 95%. I don't think I saw a bigger applause at any conference all year long than I saw from the sellers applauding the announcement of this at Amazon Accelerate. It was a big deal.
Yeah, I can understand why, because it just smooths out and creates an even playing field for all those selling on the platform from a content perspective. Also gives everybody a shot at SEO. And guess what, Peter? That wasn't the only AI-based announcement that Amazon had.
No.
You know that you come from that world. Customer reviews are one of the oldest and most important features on Amazon. When it was first launched way back in 1995, the idea was actually considered radical that you could crowdsource opinions about the quality, the experience of a product, etc. And people
it's turned out to be their secret sauce. Like they never
Absolutely.
talk about it on analyst calls, but everybody knows. They build trust into the purchase decision by advancing this user-generated content of your point, crowdsourced product quality validations.
Yeah, and over the years, I'd say Amazon has made it hard to imagine making a purchase decision without first understanding how other customers feel about it.
But do you go through and read all 35,000 reviews?
No, and that's what I'm about to get to, Peter, which is they introduced this AI-based review summary that actually parsed through all the reviews. Let's say they were 35,000, as in the example you gave. It actually parsed through what was said in the reviews, the rating, and then gave a AI outcome-based sentiment summary that would tell you positive, negative.
So it's using natural language processing to identify common sentiment themes in reviews and surfacing them all in a single review, as opposed to trying to find the one review that covered all of those. Because in all actuality, there is no one review that can cover the majority of the key sentiments around the product.
Also made people generally have to look through 20 reviews to pass through and understand, is it positive, is it negative, etc. This new AI-based one that does the natural language processing and readout helps people make that decision much, much, much faster. But so AI was a lot of tech. We just gave 3 different examples between the Ask Instacart, PDP content populator for Amazon, and then the review summary. But sounds like a lot of money was actually invested in this space. What do you think?
Yeah, and in fact, we saw a report in the middle of the year that mentioned the fact that food retailers spent in 2022, so the prior year, over $13 billion with a B on technology investments. Hardly a retailer we can think of that wasn't spending on operational capabilities, in-store, shed warehousing, other things like that, their platform, their retail media platform. All of those were components. And it just goes to show that how retailers are spending their money is not just in the salary and the product distribution. It is increasingly a core component of doing business to enable all of these technologies to make their business relevant to their consumers.
So I want to take a second, Peter, to bring Amazon back into the highlight, because this year was Amazon's largest Prime Day in its history. And it was one whopping shopping day, one platform, $12.7 billion approximately.
Enormous. And we know that now Amazon has gotten so big that they have, and this is the insider industry term for events like Prime Days or Target Circle Days or Walmart Days. They're a Walmart week. They're called festivals. I don't know why someone chose that, but that seems to be the nomenclature that's stuck. But festivals are very big. Amazon did a second festival. They're now calling it Deal Days, which was
Prime
pre-Thanksgiving.
Big Day deals.
Yeah, exactly. But it is huge. It is disrupting the order of when consumption occurs in the retail space. It's no longer as heavily loaded into the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all the way through Christmas. You're now seeing a lot of people buying in October for the deal days and even for their own purchasing consumption. Like, how did I deal with Prime Days? And someone taught me this at Flywheel. Through the course of the year, there are items they find that they are nice to have, but they're not need to have. And for the need to have, they add them to their Amazon basket, and then they move it into the save for later.
I do that.
And then when Prime Day come along, they go into that secondary basket and they see what's on deal. And if it's compelling enough, they add the basket and then they shop and then they check out. Really fascinating. But it was a big, big day. And we expect that's getting even bigger. I mean, between Amazon and what they're doing and the connectivity, and we're not going to talk about this other than here, but with Amazon introducing Black Friday football, and if you saw the advertising that went on during that event, practically every single advertisement had a QR code or some other type of mechanism to do social interaction with the consumer. It's no wonder they keep having really big days like this.
I'm going to tell you a very gutsy move on the part of Amazon to even go down the path again started with Prime Day, with Thursday Night Football going to Black Friday as in Friday. But man, did that pay off or what at the end of the day? One thing I wanted to point out with Prime Big Deal Days that took place in October before the Thanksgiving holiday, they've actually now, what I'm hearing publicly is they'll be in 20 countries, so it won't be a US only thing. So I can only imagine that the Prime Big Deal Days are going to slowly and steadily get even larger than Prime Days. But time will tell. But I think you have something very interesting on a beverage.
Well, it's not just a beverage, it's an entire QSR format. So we all know that the most iconic QSR brand in the world is McDonald's, but they're trying to stay relevant among the next generation, the Gen Zennials and so forth. So they have launched a secondary brand to the McDonald's with a tip of the hat to some of the iconic components like the Golden Arches. They've introduced cosmcs, which is a more food style relevant forward brand to Gen Zennials. So while there are core components of burgers, they're much more designer in focus. The beverages are much more innovative than the traditional 5 or 6 carbonated soft drink brands. And they've started opening up. And Shri, I know we're recording this as we're in Chicago. I've been giving serious thought as to whether on the way to the airport we have the Uber take us by one of the cosmcs.
I think we have to try it.
I would love to say that, but do you know what the wait lines are even today? Like 2.5 hours to get through the drive-through. So a little bit, we'll wait until the lines start to die down and we'll report back. But it is a really interesting, novel approach. And the question is are there some wheels to this? We'll have to see. Shri, let's talk about
one thing though, Peter. Yeah. When you have drinks like churro frappe, standard cold brew, s'mores cold brew,
I know,
turmeric spice latte.
I know someone who would like the turmeric spice latte.
Absolutely. Blackberry mint green tea, popping pear slush, and a sour energy, cherry energy burst. You're going to have a 2.5 hour line. But I'm going to say, Peter, let's still give it a shot. And you were saying?
I was going to say that in addition to iconic, long-standing retail brand names like McDonald's, we've also seen a little turmoil in that space. But like the Phoenix, sometimes legacy defunct retail brands can emerge again. What do you got for us?
So Bed Bath & Beyond is the name here. And I hardly know anyone from our generation who hasn't visited Bed Bath & Beyond.
And if it wasn't that, it was there are other brands, Bye Bye Baby, Christmas Tree Store, Cost Plus Warehouse. All of these were iconic brands. They were a beast.
And pretty much when I was younger, many furnishings in my home, all the way from towels to home decor, was all procured from Bed Bath & Beyond.
Any parent taking their kids off to college made the requisite stop at Bed Bath & Beyond.
And you'd go in store, you spend the hour.
And what would you bring with you? What would you bring with you?
All kinds of stuff.
What would you bring with you?
Start with the laundry basket.
What would you bring with you into the store? You would bring the iconic 20% off coupon.
Oh, yeah, always.
Of course, that you got in the mail.
Always. It was either 20% off one item or 20% off the entire shop.
Very rarely you got the whole one. When you would move to a new town, the post office would send you I almost wanted to move a couple of times just to get that 20% off the entire purchase coupon.
Absolutely. And but the 20% single item was in your mailer almost every week, and I must have used that exclusively.
You wouldn't go to the store if you didn't have it. Like, why would you?
I can't even tell you how many times I've used it, right? Yeah. The disappointment for me was complete failure to adopt to the e-commerce way, digital, online shopping, home delivery, click and collect. Absolutely none of that worked out for them. They didn't even try hard enough. I guess the stores were just so overcrowded with inventory. They didn't have space.
Their inventory and carrying cost was ridiculous, and they made some failed attempts to try and introduce private label brands that consumers just didn't
work out whatsoever. But however, they've been reborn now as Overstock.com, online only, and Overstock has been around quite a while. No strangers to this business.
Overstock bought out the name in auction upon bankruptcy, and they rebranded Overstock.com as Bed Bath & Beyond. So it lives on in digital world. And the interesting thing, Sri, is the Bye Bye Baby brand asset. They also Bye Bye Baby actually has reopened physical stores in about 13 locations.
So 15 locations. From there, we'll go to Instacart. So it was September 19th of this year that I think the beginning of the U.S. initial public offering comeback really was.
Well, I think people were trying to test the waters to see if they could get it restarted, and Instacart clearly was the first really big attempt.
Yeah, Instacart came out publicly and said, hey, I'm going to IPO, eventually did IPO, and when they IPO'd, had a pretty healthy $30 per share price that it started with. It's been going up and down, back and forth, but 30 is a number that kind of stood out in my mind. This was necessary for Instacart since they had been, I want to say, old chip on the block at this point, and they've been around quite a bit. And they have employees who have been there for 15 plus years, the length and duration of how long the company's been around, who obviously need a liquidity event of some sort. This helped with that, and with employee retention, I'm sure. The share price today is fallen maybe, I would say,
But less than $25.
25, yeah, maybe 20%, 15%. But it's not like the market has been super strong for anybody in the last 6 months. I think this is a little bit of a wait and watch game. I think personally, I feel it's great that Instacart did IPO because it was a talent retention play, and I hope it's worked out for them.
I think you're exactly right. It was a talent retention plan, but at the end of the day, the valuation that they came out with the IPO was substantially below the valuation of their last round of funding when the capital markets were still pretty flush. So nothing. I would say that what it did is it solved their problem, but it also told the rest of the market. The market's not ready. Other companies that are looking to go public, now is not the time. You're not going to see your valuation, which is why you've seen a lot of companies turns towards, rather than doing an IPO, possibly looking at being acquired by a larger company, because that gives them more value in the short run for those companies that are trying to have a liquidity event.
Yeah, it's currently in the close to $7 billion market cap range, so we'll see where that heads out.
Mm-hmm.
The next one I'm going to talk about a little bit, Bed Bath and Beyond, and Boxdesk is a drug chain. And who is that, Peter?
Oh, yeah, it's Rite Aid. So Rite Aid, based out of the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, you know that they've had quite a tough time, right? They tried to merge with Albertsons. That failed. They ended up trying to merge with Walgreens. They ended up, no, that didn't work. They ended up selling off a lot of their best stores to Walgreens. And while Walgreens and CVS had come to terms with settling the opioid epidemic lawsuits from states and all of the liability associated with the perception that they were pushing these addictive drugs, Rite Aid had not done so. And so in anticipation of having to do that, Rite Aid filed for bankruptcy. So the question becomes, is there enough market value for a third player, and a very tertiary third player in this marketplace? It really is CVS and Walgreens market. What was left of Rite Aid after the sale of stores to Walgreens was fairly nominal. And to date, they haven't been able to prove out that they deliver incremental value as a third player in this marketplace. They seem to be the laggard, the one that isn't performing. And so as they prepare to deal with these lawsuits, they filed for bankruptcy.
Yep. And so whatever happened to Fresh Direct?
Well, Fresh Direct, as you remember, a couple of years ago, was acquired by Ahold Delhaize. And I think you and I talked about what a great move that was. It would strengthen their Peapod business that they had acquired out of Chicago and had implemented in their stores on the East Coast. I was marveled at Fresh Direct and their ability to actually make money at selling e-commerce groceries. But a lot of that was predicated on the fact that Fresh Direct had geographic density, which means that when a truck pulls up in the suburbs of Connecticut to do a delivery, it's doing a delivery to an individual household. And then it drives down the street and goes to the next household. When Fresh Direct does a delivery in New York City, they pull up to an apartment building and they drop off a pallet or two for everyone in that apartment building. So they spend most of their time actually in a building delivering all the products and not driving between locations. And so that was why they were able to achieve profitability.
Incredibly successful.
So, but what surprised me is it would appear that Ahold Delhaize was not able to integrate the success of Fresh Direct. And particularly, I would say the other component of their success is they showed how you could do prepared foods very efficiently in e-commerce. And I didn't see that happening in Ahold Delhaize. And so they made an announcement this year that they were selling the Fresh Direct business unit to Getir, the delivery and intermediary service. So I don't know if that signaled a defeat or just a shift in business focus of the primary Ahold Delhaize business. But in any event, Fresh Direct and Ahold Delhaize, they're X's.
I'm going to jump to a very important one this year, and I think this one really stood out in my mind as a big change in the industry, and that is the beginning of the maturity cycle of retail media networks. Many retail media networks emerged. HyVee announced one somewhere in the middle of the year.
Red Media,
Gulp from
Gulp
7-Eleven,
Media Network.
DGMN from Dollar General. I mean, the list
Shout
is
out
pretty
to
long.
Lolly Jelm, who's running
Yep.
ad sales for Dollar General.
Yep, I mean, the list is very long,
Yeah.
but why I'm going to call this out as a change in the industry is now every retailer, it appears, has one. And brands are going to have to figure out who to prioritize, how to get it done, how to measure, what standards are accurate, how it's going to be part of a marketing mix. Is it purely lower funnel? Like, a lot of complications are now popping up as a result. But I think 2023 was the great year of reconciliation, an acknowledgement from brands that this has to be treated like media.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the things we've been talking about the last 24 hours, Shri, is the fact that with all of these retail media networks popping up, the issue for brands is I want to invest, but I want to do it at scale. Because as we know, the effort it takes to put into exercising a retail media campaign for a retail that has 10 stores in scale versus a retailer that has 10,000 is fundamentally the same amount of effort. So if that's the case, I need to be more efficient with my time. I'm going to go to where the audience is, and I need scale. So what's our prediction for 2024? We fundamentally believe that a lot of these regional and super regional retailers, absent, third-party ecosystems and platforms like Criteo and CitrusAd, they're going to need to ally themselves and create a single point of entry so that someone who invests in a retail media campaign, they can do so and I'm not saying this is a prediction or anything, but if I were to predict anyone, I would say, so that when you execute, you can execute at Wegmans, Meijer, HEB, and Publix all at the same time with one campaign. That will provide the scale necessary to appeal to the brands. Because why do I, as a brand, want to put in the same amount of effort for a campaign at Kroger as I do for Gelson's in Southern California with 16 stores? I mean, it's a waste of my time. It
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And which is why, Peter, we will wrap it up in what was a fascinating year that we've summarized with the emergence and a lot of talk by the IAB, which I'd love for you to expand who they are. What did the IAB discuss this year?
Yeah, the Interactive Advertising Bureau is an industry association that tries to create commonality, does research and studies around interactive advertising. With a very strong push coming out of a handful of retailers, most notably Albertsons Media Collective. Shout out to our dear friend Claire Wyatt for being the person who really championed this. They said, listen, until we create standards around, because there's a real challenge around buying. Traditional media buyers don't know how to buy retail media. And that's because there are so many different platforms and they have different terms and they have different methodologies. If you want to make advertising through retail media more accessible, you need to create common asset terms and definitions and capabilities. And so, and then on the back end, be able to measure it in a commensurate way. Either measure it in a uniform way or allow brands to measure it the way they want to measure it so they can measure it across platforms the way they want to measure it.
I think it's the beginning of the maturity of retail media.
It had to be, because the problem is that absent that capability, most brands were funding investment in retail media platforms. Not put Amazon aside, put maybe Walmart aside. It was being funded out of trade. It was not being funded out of traditional brand. And increasingly, it does ultimately justify brand investment, because the more traditional mechanisms that brand would fund, television, print media, those are waning in terms of their importance and relevance to consumers. So retail media is a logical place to park that, but without those standards, it makes it very hard for them to justify. And so what ends up happening is it just ends up being a tax, and therefore it's something that they're going to fund out of their trade budgets, and they're just moving the shell game around.
No debate, Peter. 2024 will see, I think, some real maturity in retail media networks, prioritization of who gets the dollars, and more importantly, the establishment of standards for measuring what is considered a successful campaign, and the introduction of retail media as part of the marketing mix. So those are some fascinating 15, 18-hour topics we covered here that kind of hit our highlight for 2023. Let us know in the comments what you feel were some of the highlights that you all observed in 2023. That is a wrap of this episode. I want to thank our audience, 28,000 strong on LinkedIn. We know that is a big number. Without you, we don't exist. Thank you for the clicks, the comments, the direct messages, for engaging with us. Thank you for showing up when we are live on stage somewhere in the country. Thank you for coming to the CPG Guys party.
Hey, Shri,
back in Vegas.
We should probably tease them a little because we're coming up on 2024. We got some big things in store for next year, don't we?
Well, if you're heard the Omnis,
that was a big one.
You know that the Omnis will go live in New York City around the holiday time frame in 2024. So we can't wait for that. And let's not give away the plot for anything else.
Well, no, you might see some academic things happening around the CPG Guys.
More to come on that early January itself.
There may be some other things around learning materials and what have you. There's a lot the CPG Guys have.
Well, we've always said this is about education. If we're not sharing, we're not caring.
We're working on a Netflix documentary. No, that's not us.
I don't think
that's Laura. That's Laura and Cat's Eye. They've got a documentary.
Yeah, my daughter's Netflix documentary on the making of the band should be available on Netflix soon. We'll let y'all know when that happens. But here on the CPG Guys, we're very thankful for all of you. Thank you for listening to us week over week, episode over episode. Enjoy our 7-day programming from Melissa, from Andrea, Brian, Peter, and myself, Shri. Thank you for a great 2023. We're looking forward to this much fun or more in 2024 and hope to see you some corner of this country at some forum live.
Happy New Year, y'all.
Happy New Year, guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.